The next thing that I want to address is one thing you have always done for me that I have so appreciated with you. And I know we've had a conversation here recently that we've kind of had to rein back on some things a little bit, financial wise. But you are so good at doing things for me that make me feel special. They have that book out there, The 5 Love Languages. Mm-hmm. And I just think about how good you are. And I think one of yours with me is gift giving. Mm-hmm. It's so important that we do things that make each other feel important, feel special. I know with you, intimacy is kind of your thing that you love and that makes you feel special with me. Mm-hmm. And but not just here you go. Right. It's really for me to make the effort. And so it's important that in marriage you do things for one another that make each other feel special. And if you don't know what that is with your spouse, you need to go find out. Go ask them, what makes you feel special with me? What can I give to you that makes you feel special? Go ahead.
Well, if you want to, and perfect time to plug this in, I think one of the best things that happened to us in our premarital counseling was John had us read the book, His Needs, Her Needs.
And I cannot remember who it's by either.
I can't either.
And I don't think it's a Christian book. If I remember, it's actually.
I don't think
years.
It is. Yeah, I think it might have been by a Christian writer, but it was more focused on the relationship.
Right.
His Needs, Her Needs, really, it's kind of like 5 love languages, mm-hmm. but it kind of focuses it just a little bit more. I would highly recommend couples, whether you're premarital or already married, read that book because it will kind of help open the husband's eye up to what his specific wife needs, because just whatever Tara needs is not going to translate to what someone else's wife is going to need. But that book will help the husband understand what his wife specifically needs, and it will also do the same. The wife will understand what the husband needs. That was a great starting point for our relationship or our marriage. And then most recently, we did a book thing together. Mm-hmm. I just found it randomly, yep. and was interested. And the books are called Husband in Pursuit. That's by Ryan Frederick, and the wife's version is called Wife in Pursuit, and that's by Ryan's wife, Selena Frederick. And it's a 31-day challenge. And I think it took us, 3.5 months to actually go 31 days. You can go day 1 to day 31 and in 1 month knock this book out. It is that simple of a book.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time.
Right. For us, with kids and activities and everything else, it was a struggle.
Well, you and I were both also doing another book, and we're in a discipling relationship too. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing that as well. Yeah. So we had a lot going on. We had a lot going on, but we communicated with one another on it and just kind of said, did you do your book today? Yes or no? And if it was a no, okay, we'll do it tomorrow. So we did it in a non-pressure type manner.
But the days coincide.
Yes.
So the wife in pursuit, the husband in pursuit, you have day 1, and then you all the way through to day 31. And if you follow the book together, and what I did like about this book series was it was very Christ focused. Mm-hmm. But you're on day 7, and the husband has a reading, and it's almost like a devotional. And then it goes through a series of questions, and then at the end of it, it has a challenge on how to pursue your wife for that day. Same thing for her. She has a reading devotional, series of questions that kind of help you think about how your wife or how your husband is, how their mind works. And then it has a challenge for the wife to pursue her husband.
And it gives you a heads up too, mm-hmm. for weeks coming about how long it'll take, how much money it'll cost, how much you need to prepare. So like if in a couple of weeks or so at the lesson you're doing that day, at the bottom it'll say heads up. In 2 weeks, you're going to have to go do X, Y, and Z. So start to prepare. So it's not like one day you're doing this pursuit and you got to do something big and you're like, oh no, like how am I going to do this? I got to do X, Y, and Z today. So it lets you know, and it lets you kind of prepare ahead of time so you're not caught off guard by anything. And that's what's kind of nice about it.
And we did that book recently. And our marriage wasn't in a bad place or anything like that. It was just, I saw it randomly and thought, hey, you want to try this? And it ended up being a wonderful experience.
Yeah,
so highly recommend that also.
It is one of the most favorite, my most favorite books that we have done together, because we've done several. And it is definitely one of the best. I even, when we were done, I went and like researched what other books they had written, and there was another one. I remember I came to you, I was like, ooh, let's do this one next. And he's like, whoa, like I got to do some other things, you know, and he was reading another book and he's like, hold on, we'll do it. But he's like, I'm not ready yet. So I enjoyed it so much with them, and it really challenged me in my marriage, and not just in my marriage, but in my walk with Christ. It was just so Christ-centered, and I enjoyed it so much, and I'm so glad that you researched and found that. And that's just so important, that you find ways to reconnect or to build your marriage. And if you're it's like Jeremy said, if your marriage isn't in a bad spot, it's still okay to do things to better your marriage, because the more you're building your marriage, the better it's going to become, that when you deal with hard times, you're prepared, you're built upon a strong foundation, right? It's like when we talk about God's word and we say, don't start reading God's word when you're in trouble. Read God's word every day. So that way you're prepared when you face a difficult time. You know what God's word says about it, and you're built on a strong foundation. It's the same in your marriage. Yeah. When your marriage is good, keep working to make your marriage better. So when you go through hard times, your marriage is strong. Mm-hmm. You know, don't ever be content with where your marriage is at.
Once you reach a goal, move the goalpost.
Yeah.
Set a new goal.
That's what you are so good at for us. You are always moving us forward. You never let us stay just kind of where we're at. You're always encouraging me, you're encouraging us to always be better and moving us forward. Like I said, and I'm going to reiterate this again, we have our hard times. Mm-hmm. We get frustrated with one another. You've had to communicate to me hard things. I've had to communicate to you hard things. It's not pleasant, but it's about keeping that strong foundation, so that way when you have to deal with those things, the first thing that's not coming in your mind is, I'm done and I want to get a divorce. That what's coming in your mind is, how can we work through this? How can we figure this out? What does God's word say that we need to do? Who can I go to for godly counsel? Mm. There is nothing wrong with going to people for counsel in a hard time. Absolutely. Nothing wrong with it. Don't hide it. Don't keep it a secret out of fear. Again, this goes back to the vulnerable woman part. Don't keep it inside out of fear of judgment, because that's when it's really going to struggle. Find someone to walk alongside you and your husband. Find someone to encourage you. Women, find a female. Men, find a male. Find someone that can counsel you. That's so important.
Absolutely.
I know you have walked alongside people in some difficult times, and it's just so important that you have someone that's giving you good advice and encouraging you, not someone that's feeding into what you're going through. Mm-hmm. So the next, we talked about going away together and doing things that make each other feel special. So the next one we're going to address is affection. Okay. And we're going to talk about how what's the difference between sex versus affection, because they're two totally different things.
Absolutely.
And when you mentioned his needs, her needs, mm-hmm. I remember this to this day. I don't remember what number 2, 3, 4, I think it was the top 5 needs of a man and a woman, and I don't remember 2 through 5, but I remember 1. for both. The number one need of a man is sex. The number one need of a woman is affection. So let's talk a little bit about kind of like what that looks like, how that affected us.
I think as humans, we tend to focus on our own selfish desires and needs, and that tends, in a relationship, that'll tend to get you in a troublesome area. When I said I do, and I was going to spend the rest of my life with you, that meant that I was going to trust that you were going to take care of my needs, and that it now became my job and my duty to take care of yours. And that's a commitment that not a lot of people have kind of thought of in that way, but that's kind of where my mindset has always been in our marriage, is that, okay, you are now my responsibility, and your top three needs of, and again, every wife's going to be differently, but your top three, those are my focuses. And that I'm going to trust and have patience that you're going to do the same thing with me.
And communicating when that need isn't being met, which that's a hard one sometimes. I know there have been several times when you've came to me and you've basically said, I miss you, or I need time with you. Because my mind has gotten so focused, and a lot of times my struggle, and I've communicated this to you over and over again, and I know you know it, but is my fatigue. My MS, I struggle with very heavy fatigue. And so when I get done with work, a lot of times my brain, and even though I sit at a desk, my brain is tired, my body is tired. And so a lot of times for me, I've had to kind of push through that to be able to meet your need. And that's something we've had to have lots of conversations about in our marriage, and are still kind of working through even now. But it's important to me that I always meet your need. But a lot of times I think where I have failed with meeting your needs is like when I get done with work and we're kind of making dinner, and you'll come to me and say, I just want to spend time with you, and I'm like, yeah, okay. But then life starts to happen after all that, right? Kids, or I'll sit on the couch, and my famous thing is I always wind up falling asleep on the couch, and he tells me that all the time. He's like, don't lay down. You are going to fall asleep. I'm like, no, I'm just resting my eyes. He's like, okay. And it's a joke in our family that if we turn on a movie, the kids are like, oh, mom won't even watch it. She's going to be asleep in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. And so it's getting lost in those things. And then by the time we go to bed, it's like, too tired. I don't want to,
Right.
And so it's kind of pushing through those things. And that's something that I'm growing in even now, and that we've had a lot of conversations about, and me being better at that for you.
Well, and I think, look, men are simple. We're simple. Everybody knows that. Women, way more complicated. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's just the truth. And I think if men understood that a woman's brain's just not going to flip a switch like that, it's a coordinated effort throughout the day. And I think I miss that sometimes because I get so busy. Like, I might shoot you a text in the morning or talk to you in the morning, and then I won't talk to you for like another 8 to 10 hours because I get so busy at work.
Well, it's not on purpose.
No, it's just
again, busyness.
But one thing I've learned is that affection is in a lot of different ways and shapes and sizes. For a man, usually it's sex. For a woman, it's a sweet little love note. It's a nice text message. It's a funny reel that reminds her of a situation from Instagram. Me and you do that a lot. Yeah. It's little things like that, but if you can figure out a way to communicate affection to your wife, even while you're not there, throughout the day, then all of a sudden she's starting to think about you throughout the day. And then she's feeling love throughout the day, to where one of my favorite things is when I finally do get home after a long day, the just like you almost come running trying to hug me, and almost to the place where I'm like, hold on, like
He's like, I haven't even set my stuff
I'm not
down
ready
yet.
for this. Because while I act that way, deep down I love it, because I feel loved.
Yeah.
And I feel like, oh, my wife's happy to see me, and that goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, and even a lot of times when you come home, now that I'm kind of back in my office again, if you don't come back and say...
You get mad.
I do. I get upset, because if he doesn't come back there, and like if I'm on a call or whatever, he'll still peek his head in and be like, I'm home, or he'll blow me a kiss. And if I hear him in the kitchen and he hasn't come back to do that yet, when I'm done with whatever I'm doing, I walk up there and I'm like,
What's up, dude?
I'm like, hello, did you forget me? Which he doesn't do it on purpose. He just gets occupied getting, starts cooking or getting something to drink, or the kids have stopped him for something or whatever. So it's not intentional, but I enjoy that moment so much when he gets home, that when he doesn't do it, I'm like, did you forget something, sir? So it's making sure that, we're meeting those needs in each other's life, and communicating when those needs aren't being met. And
Not in a hateful or hurtful way.
right.
In a loving, again, not blunt force honesty, but patient honesty.
Well, that almost leads into the next one, which is building a thick skin in your marriage. A thick skin communication. Saying things to your spouse sometimes that is going to turn difficult, that is not always easy.
No.
And it's like, and I'll go back to this, that years ago, when we were in the car and you told me you were bored, that was hard for me as a wife, because the one thing we don't want is for our husband to be bored. We always want them to constantly be into us and pursuing us. But then he tells me that, and again, my initial response was anger. I was mad, because my defense went up.
Sure.
Now, back then, I was in a very different place spiritually than I am now. I was still struggling with being very guarded, and still struggling with past hurts. And so, again, my initial response was anger and putting my guard up with you,
Sure.
and giving you the silent treatment. And but the more and more I kind of had to dig in to myself and what Jeremy had shared with me, I was like, oh, yeah. And a lot of times the reason I get that way with that type of response is most of the time I probably know that you're right. And that's the tough part.
Can we stop right now? Let's put a big pin in this.
Most of the time I probably know that you're right. Most of the time I probably know that you're right.
And I just need that last 30 seconds
I can't.
in my own clip, so that I can just shoot it away anytime I need to. Thank you. Okay, back to it.
Most of the time I probably know that you're right.
Well, let's go back to that conversation. It was difficult.
Yeah, very hard.
I knew I was going to hurt your feelings.
Well, you even, if I recall, you even got a little teary-eyed when you said it, because it was hard for you to say that to me.
2 reasons I cried. Number one, and I don't cry very often, but number one, I knew I was going to hurt you. Number two, I knew I was potentially going to hurt myself, because there's a fear in being honest, and that it might actually make things worse.
Yeah.
And immediately it kind of did, because you were mad. Mm-hmm. I remember we went and had lunch. I can tell you, we went to Freebirds, had a burrito bowl,
I don't know how
and
you remember that.
barely spoke to each other the entire time.
I believe it. Yeah.
Because of how offended you were. Mm-hmm. The hard conversation was later on, when you wanted to deal with it, and then you kind of told me the truth that, okay, I'm a little bored too. and that your needs weren't getting met. And then, but in that open and honesty with each other, if both of your hearts are ready to receive the truth, and whether you want to hear it or not, at least if both hearts are open to that, then all of a sudden now we can get to work on how to fix things.
Right.
Because if your heart's open and mine's not, nothing's going to get accomplished.
And you both have to be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. And I will say that's one thing that I've been blessed with, is that both of us have always been willing to go that extra mile, or to work on whatever needed to be worked on. Maybe one of us didn't feel that way initially. Most of the time, me. It takes me longer to come around than you do. Mm-hmm. You're much better at that than me. And
I'm a guy. I can compartmentalize. Mm-hmm. I can let go of things really quickly.
Yeah. And how would you? So not all married couples are lucky enough to have it to where both of them want to work on things. Mm-hmm. How would you encourage, if there's one spouse that's wanting to do that and fix things and make things better, but you've got another one that's content with where they're at, or they mm-hmm. don't have the willingness to make it better? What suggestions would you give?
Okay, so I'll speak as a husband pursuing a wife. That book that we mentioned, even if the wife is not going through that, the husband could read that book, and don't share it. Don't tell your wife. If you read that book and she's not, don't tell your wife. Let her see the change, because she's going to start noticing some things like, he brought me flowers randomly. What's going on? But I would encourage the husband, okay, what are 3 things that you know your wife needs that you're not providing? And do those 3 things. Do you have to do those 3 things every day? No. Do you need to try and hit on at least one a day? Yeah. And the simple stuff like being affectionate and that sounds so simple, but holding your wife's hand, being chivalrous, making her feel like she did when she dated you, that's going to go so far in the relationship, because that's why she wanted to marry you to begin with. Mm-hmm. You wanted to marry me because of how I treated you. And a lot of times when you stop doing those things within marriage, it's like, okay, we made it, we did it, I put a ring on it.
But that's where things start to go downhill.
Right, because you think, okay, I don't have to do all that stuff anymore. I don't have to take care of those things anymore. And it's the complete opposite of the truth, is you never stop.
Yep.
You never stop.
And I would say the same for the ladies too. And again, the name of the books are Wife in Pursuit and Husband in Pursuit. And I would also encourage the same. You can do the book on your own. It's more beneficial, I think, if you're doing it together. But if you have a spouse who is not in that place, start doing the book on your own. Let them see the change in you. And bring it before God is the big thing I would suggest.
Absolutely.
Ask God to change your spouse's heart and to speak to their heart. And He will. He will do that. And so that kind of, I want to read, we had written down when we planned for this that both working towards the success of your marriage on both parties. But at the same time, if you've got, not all spouses are willing to do that. They feel content with where they are, or maybe they're not seeing it. So that's kind of what we would suggest for you. Mark 10:9 says, therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And we talked about that in Matthew as well, and God repeats it again. One thing, and we didn't really write this down, but one thing that I think is so important in a marriage is really hearing your spouse when they caution you of something, or maybe feel uncomfortable with something that you're doing, or maybe you're hanging out with somebody and they're kind of like, I don't know about that person. Really heeding what they're saying to you and taking that to heart. Because I can think of some times where we've both done that with one another. I know I've had a friendship in the past where you kind of were heeding me about that individual, and I was like, oh, no. And then later on down the road, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
You were right, and I didn't take the heed and the caution that you gave me. So there have been lots of instances where, because your spouse can see things looking in because they know you best. Nobody else except God knows you that well, and you really need to heed what they are saying to you if about an individual or about someone or about a group or whatever that may be. Listen to what they're saying, heed their cautions, because they are seeing something that you're not seeing. I remember even coming to you one time and there was an individual and I said, there's something about him that just isn't sitting right with me. And I remember you looked at me and you're like, you're crazy. He's a great guy. Now, it didn't come to pass until years later, but something came out in the open about this person that had been going on for years and years. And you came to me and you were like, babe, like God was speaking to you. You saw and felt that in your spirit. And did I know exactly what it was? No, I didn't. I just told you something wasn't sitting right with me with this individual. And I remember you thought I was crazy because they were in a position of leadership and but in the church, yeah. But my heart just it was something about this individual that didn't feel right for me. And like I said, I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't say, oh, they're doing X, Y, and Z. No, when I was around them, there was this uneasiness. Right. And I even said something to you another time that I noticed them doing something, and everybody came back with me with a response, oh, that's just how they are. And I'm like, I'm like, it shouldn't be, that's not okay, but everybody blew it off like it wasn't a big deal because they were in leadership. Right. And so just make sure that you're heeding cautions from your spouse. Heed what they're saying because they observe you better than anybody else, and they observe the people around you and their intent. So make sure that you're listening to them. And we kind of already talked about these couple of things. Having a strong community around you, which Jeremy and I, we've got a strong community in our church and in our small group, and we really hold tightly to that. Another one that we've kind of touched on is going to church together. Yep. And making sure that you have a place that you can go and kind of refresh. And I always like to call Sundays my reset button. It's a start to a new week. It's my time to, get before the Lord around my community of like-minded people and just really refresh myself. And this is probably our most favorite one, and this is our last one, is having fun and being open-minded.
Sure.
So and one thing you always say is you say, do you notice we always laugh a lot? Yeah, I mean,
if you know me, I like to joke a little bit. Not a lot, but a little. And we've always just had this comical themed relationship. I know when I get done with work and I sit down, I'll bring up Instagram and I'll have 5-6 reels just from Tara. Yeah. And they're all things that she found funny. I won't tell you what they are because half of them are crude, but they're hilarious.
Well, and a lot of them, so I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but for some reason I get a giggle out of I don't want to say when people injure themselves.
Oh God, you're diabolical.
That sounds horrible. It's like when people trip or fall.
Someone that stubs their toe, and my wife is over here about to pee her pants because they stubbed their toe. Or what was the last one you sent me? This guy trips on his front steps and he's running down his driveway and his head slams into the truck. my wife lost it over that, and I'm looking at this going, that poor guy. Like,
Yeah, he's like, man, that guy in his poor truck. And his wife comes out, and I think in the video, the wife even says, she's like, what'd you do to your truck? And the guy's like, hello.
we've always found a way to laugh.
Yeah.
I'm a practical joker, so sometimes I will say I've taken it too far, and that you didn't like what I did, but I at least tried. That has to count for something, right? But yeah, having fun. I think this goes back to dating. Just because you get married doesn't mean that yourself has changed, that your person has changed. I was funny when me and Tara dated. I try to stay funny now. And so when we go on dates now, I try to be that exact same person. I changed through the years, obviously. I'm not as skinny as I used to be.
Oh my God.
But I'm essentially the same person. And you know what? I'll even say this. I'm definitely better of a person than I was back then because I'm more spiritually mature than I was back then. I'm still funny, but I think that I've grown a lot on a spiritual standpoint of being a Christ follower, of being a spiritual leader in our family, to our kids. But if you're not having fun, then what's the point? That's kind of the approach I've always had. Like, yes, there are serious moments and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to have fun.
Yeah.
I want to laugh. I want to have a smile on my face. It's much easier to have a smile on your face than to be pissed off and mad and have a frown on you, whatever it may be. I definitely don't want to be sad.
Yeah.
So at all costs, we've always tried to just have fun.
Right. Well, and even now, I think of just even this last week. So we're trying to be, very careful with our finances and things like that. And one of the things, and hopefully you're okay with me sharing this, is you always say that you have a hard time telling me no. And so I decided that I was gonna test you on that.
Yeah, that was rude.
And so I came up to him and I said, oh, hey, like, look at this. Can I have this? And it wasn't even anything that I would probably normally be interested in. And he's like, okay, let me see it. And I was like, you just failed. I'm like, you just failed. He's like,
that's a mean trick.
He's like, what? I'm like, you're supposed to start telling me no. And he was like, okay, that was mean. Which I probably got more of a giggle out of it than you did. But it's just doing little things like that even when you're figuring something out and going through things is finding a way to laugh and enjoying one another and just always being better for each other.
Stress can take a lot out of you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times maybe that's just me, and in awkward moments and in stress, I'm the guy that's like, always trying to find a way to make everyone laugh because it breaks the tension. And I've always done that with us. But those breaks in tension kind of help. There's this sense of relief. And yeah, that tension is going to come back, but try and make the most of it and break the tension, have a little bit of fun, even in the worst times.
Yeah, but it definitely helps for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, babe,
You're welcome.
for coming on here and sharing your heart about marriage and about our marriage, and
Yeah.
even sharing some difficult things with everybody out there. And Jeremy and we're so glad that you joined us. And like I said, and I'm going to say it probably for the 500th time, just because we share these things doesn't mean that we're always perfect at them. It's just things that we have learned and grown. Thank you so much for joining us on The Vulnerable Woman. If you feel like this content has been valuable to you, please like, share, subscribe on our channel so that others can be blessed by what God has to say to them. Thank you so much again for joining us today. We love you guys. Remember to let down your guard and be vulnerable with God.